Greetings once again, dear listeners, and thank you for joining us here at Republic Broadcasting Network. I'm Bruce G. McCarthy, your host for the next 1 hour, and you are listening to Datum Line. In our last Datum Line broadcast, entitled Economic Myths and the Science of Deceit, Part 6, we continued our appraisal of the peculiar underpinnings of Marxist populist economic theory, set forth as 18 foundation stones in the Truth and Money book by Mr. Thorne and Mr. Warner. So far, we've covered 13 of those maxims in the last 3 broadcasts, ending on principle number 14 in our last message. In today's message, we'll pick up where we left off after our first break. Meanwhile, if I were to best summarize the first 14 precepts of Mr. Thorne and Warner, it would be to quote Karl Marx, who actually wrote their outline in his Communist Manifesto at the 5th plank, which says, centralization of credit in the hands of the state. Now, that's not to be construed as a mere subdivision of government, but rather the central or sovereign governing body, by means of state capital and an exclusive monopoly. It was perhaps maxim number 14 that hammered home the tyrannical nature of their legislative proposal more explicitly than all of their other confounding foundational doctrines. Number 14, you remember, said, a sovereign government exercising its monetary authority creates money and spends it into circulation simply by writing good checks on no funds to pay for authorized national expenditures. You know, it's pretty difficult to differentiate good checks from bad checks under this principle, isn't it? You know, I'd be so embarrassed to admit such a belief in print. If any of us get caught doing this, we go to jail, which is what I mean by a tyrannical 2-tier system. 2 sets of rules, one for the elite global club members and another set of rules to govern the rest of us. To quote Thomas Jefferson, tyranny is defined as that which is legal for the government, but illegal for the citizenry. Could it be stated any more clearly than that? Each of the 18 foundational principles of monetary science, as they call it, to which populists subscribe, stand or fall in accordance with their interpretation of the United States Constitution at Article 1, Section 8, and Paragraph 5, regarding the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. From just these few words, the authors and countless critics of the Federal Reserve System insist that we accept their skewed interpretation, that Congress was given the power to compel free people to surrender their labor and production in exchange for what they call good checks written on no funds. While Mr. Jefferson, as one of our ancestral giants, would define such legalized theft as tyranny. Is there enough God-given common sense left in America to ratify Mr. Jefferson's definition of tyranny? If not, then the cause for liberty is hopelessly lost. Mr. Thorne and Mr. Warner quote Article 1, Section 8, and Paragraph 5 no less than 3 times on page 14, 139, and 154, and make direct reference to it no less than 6 times more on page 16, 23, 157, 209, 222, and 228, while simultaneously applying a gross misconstruction thereto in all 9, at least 9, of those instances. So important is this misconstruction of the Constitution in substantiating their mythology, that we will open today's investigation on this topic before we move forward to principles 15 through 18. Despite glowing praise for our constitutional forefathers, nowhere do the authors even mention Article 1, Section 10, and Paragraph 1, which mandates that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Our message today is entitled Economic Myths and the Science of Deceit. As I mentioned on the other side of this break, I was going to go into, and will go into now, the Truth and Money book, written by Mr. Thorne and Mr. Warner. Now, it's written in dialogue form, and there are several people involved in this. I presume it's an imaginary dialogue, although it may be very similar to dialogues that they've had with real people. And we want to see how the authors interpret Article 1, Section 8, and Paragraph 5, to which they seemingly pay great homage. The Constitution, to which they pay homage, I should say. And they're not the only ones. I'll be going to Honest Money by Dr. Charles Norburn, Billions for the Bankers and Debts for the People by Sheldon Emery, American Free Press, and we'll also take the Dennis Kucinich bill and we'll analyze that concerning just this one facet here, Article 1, Section 8, and Paragraph 5. It comes up frequently. In the Truth and Money book, we're going to start at page 14. This is the third edition, 1989. The dialogue now. Do the Federal Reserve banks and the commercial banks create our money? Martha asked. Yes, they do, I replied. The Federal Reserve System has assumed the power to create money. This in spite of the fact that the Constitution states specifically that the authority to create money must rest with the sovereign government. That word sovereign will come up quite a few times, and we'll address that in a while. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 says that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Well, they quote it correctly, but they interpret it incorrectly. It says coin, doesn't say create. We'll turn to page 16. The question no one ever seems to ask is this: where does the Fed get the authority to create money? The answer is that the Fed has assumed the money-creating authority, which the Constitution delegates to the Congress. Did the Federal Reserve Act change the Constitution, Nancy asked. No, it didn't, I replied. According to the Constitution, money-creating authority still belongs to the Congress. To change this, there would have to be an amendment that would remove Article 1, Section 8 and Clause 5. No, they would have to add it to Article 1, Section 8 and Clause 5 because it doesn't say it. I'm not in favor of removing anything from the Constitution, Martha said. The authors of the Constitution didn't act on whim. No, you're right, Martha, they didn't. They had a very good reason for writing this provision the way they did. You're right, Martha, they did, I replied. They go on. Page 22. Question number 48. Who gave the Federal Reserve the power to create the money necessary to cover its checks? Wouldn't you like to be able to do that? Wouldn't you like to be able to create the money to cover your own checks? Boy, what a swindle that would be. Now, page 23. Here's the answer, Ed says. Ed is another member of this dialogue. The Congress, because this power to create money is given by the Constitution to Congress, and only Congress can delegate this power, and this it has done in creating the Federal Reserve System, an agency Congress authorized to create money. Does Congress really have the right to delegate its constitutional power to create money to an agency that has privately owned regional banks? Nancy asked. This is a very important issue, I replied. If we say that the Congress does have the right to delegate this constitutional power, then we would also have to agree that it is all right for Congress to delegate any of its other powers, such as the power to declare war, end quote. Well, at least on the subject of delegation of authority, I would agree with these authors. There is a principle in law that powers delegated are not redelegable. But you see, they continue to repeat the concept, the nonsensical concept, that the Constitution, which says that Congress has the power to coin money, really means to create it. And there's a little difference between the word create and coin. Well, let's move on. Let's go now to page 139. Here it goes. Let's look once again at what the Constitution says about money. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, the Congress shall have power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Immediately after that, they say, the dictionary tells us that to coin means to make, to create. End quote. Okay, what dictionary are they referring to? I don't know. They say the dictionary. I thought there were a few more than just one. Okay, let's go to the word coin and find out what that word means and see if the word coin means to make and to create, and that's all it means. We'll go to Webster's American Dictionary of the English Language first, 1828. Quote, to stamp a metal and convert it into money, to mint. Okay, that's definition number 1. Definition number 2, to make, as to coin words. Oh, okay, so that's to invent words, okay? 3, to make, to forge, to fabricate, in an ill sense, as to coin a lie, to coin a fable. We'll go to Webster's 1966, New World Dictionary of the American Language, College Edition, definition 1A. To make coins by stamping metal. B. To make metal into coins. Okay? Primary definition is always to stamp metal into coins. Number 2, to make up, devise, invent as a new word or phrase. Random House College Dictionary, 1982. Definition number 3, because we're dealing with a verb as opposed to a noun. Number 3, to make money by stamping metal. To give you an example how you might use that in a sentence. The mint is coining pennies. Definition number 4, to convert metal into money. To give you another example of how to use it in a sentence. The mint coins copper into pennies. Hey, it was 1982. They weren't going to coin gold and silver, you see. That was all done away with, so we're just left with pennies and copper, you see. Definition number 5, to make, invent, fabricate, to coin words. Remember now, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Warner said, the dictionary tells us that to coin means to make, to create. And those were the only definitions that they gave to that word. As if to say this definition was legally sufficient to explain a word that our forefathers used in the principal document to formulate our system of government. That you do not do. So let's go to Black's Law Dictionary and to Bouvier's Law Dictionary with respect to this word, coin. My Black's Law Dictionary, I've only got a 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th edition. The 2nd edition is 1910. The 6th edition is 1990. All of these editions that I have, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, all give the same definition. Here it is, quote, to fashion pieces of metal into a prescribed shape, weight, and degree of fineness, and to stamp them with prescribed devices by authority of government in order that they may circulate as money, end quote. Now, what kind of an authority does Blacks go to? They go to Legal Tender Cases, 79, United States Supreme Court Reports at page 457, or 12 Wallace, United States Supreme Court Reports at page 457, or 20 Lawyers Edition at page 287, or Sayers versus Hedges, 22 Indiana Reports, page 282. As an afterthought, perhaps, and without any court cites, they include another definition, to invent words or phrases. We go to Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and we find exactly the same definition as we found in Black's, with exactly the same legal tender case cite. Any mention of coin meaning to print or create? No. Does the Bible say in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God coined heaven and earth? Or in the beginning God printed heaven and earth? There'd be a little difference between coining it and printing it, wouldn't there? What does the word create mean? Webster's 1966 dictionary says, to cause to come into existence. If we go to Webster's 1828, however, we get a little bit more emphatic definition, several of them, in fact. Create, to produce, to bring into being from nothing. That's kind of how the populists want to do it. They want to create money out of nothing, you see. To cause to exist. And then Webster cites, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And he cites Genesis chapter 1. So we see Webster's 1966 left something out of their definition. They only said to cause to come into existence. Webster's 1828 said to bring into being from nothing. But Webster's 1828 goes on to say, and even cites biblical authority, to say that there are other aspects of creation. For example, definition number 5, to make or produce by new combinations of matter already created, and by investing these combinations with new forms, constitutions, and qualities, to shape and organize. Webster gives another definition from the Scriptures, if you will, or an application, I should say, also from Genesis chapter 1, where he says, God created man in his own image. A little difference because, you see, man was created out of the dust of the earth. Definition number 6, again, Webster's 1828. To form anew, to change the state or character, to renew. Gives an example from Psalm chapter 51, where David said, create in me a clean heart. But the word create, according to the authors, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Warner, populists, and other Federal Reserve critics favoring nationalization of the Federal Reserve, means to produce or to make out of nothing.